Welcome to More Than Miles, the podcast created to look deep into what it means to be a runner and endurance athlete. Our episodes are filled with real stories from real runners, elite to the everyday athlete. We bring together healthcare providers, athletes, and dive deep into topics that matter most to runners. I'm Dr. Mihevc Edwards, physical therapist, author, athlete, and complete coffee addict.
And I'm Dr. Kacy Seynders, physical therapist, athlete, and pun expert extraordinaire. We're so passionate about changing running culture to improve the health, wellness, and fulfillment of our endurance athlete community. And we hope that these conversations inspire you to focus on putting your health first so that performance and PRs can follow. Now let's get to the show. Today on More Than Miles, we have Lindsey Cortes. Lindsey Cortes is the owner of Rise Up Nutrition and host of the Female Athlete Nutrition podcast. She's a sports dietitian, entrepreneur, and lifelong athlete. She founded Rise Up Nutrition, LLC, as a virtual sports nutrition practice helping female athletes use food as fuel to perform at their highest level since 2018. Her flagship program, the Female Athlete System Transformation, or FAST, specifically helps girls and women overcome disordered eating and Red S as fast as possible. Lindsey has been featured in Runner's World, Women's Running, and many other national publications. She's also an expert for Fast Bananas.
We had a great conversation with Lindsey today. Every time we talk with her, we learn an awful lot, and it's really good information. She goes over what is disordered eating. It's not a common thing that is really in the literature, but it's talked about a lot, and she kind of dives into that. She also talks about underfueling, and she touches a little bit about what sports nutrition is and how it can help you as an athlete. So you may be somebody that doesn't even realize that you're not fueling properly or reaching your highest potential. And she kind of goes through that and gives you information about it so that you can figure it out and maybe become a better athlete or at least a happier one. Hi, Lindsey. It's so nice to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited. I love your podcast and I love all the work that, you guys do. It's just love following. So I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah, me too. And I think the last time we actually had a full chat other than email or text messaging was the last time I was on your podcast, which was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was about a year ago or almost a year ago. Yeah.
That was. Oh, wow. Well, we're glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we usually start each podcast off a little bit about, we like to hear everybody's running background or what their kind of sports background was. So if you could kind of jump in and talk to us a little bit about what your background in running is, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I would just call myself like a child athlete. I did lots of sports and I do have two older sisters. So for my father to have three daughters, he put all of us in sports, soccer, skiing, basketball. He was my soccer coach for many years. And we were all athletic. I think I took to it a bit more. But honestly, both my sisters were very athletic and very successful as well. But until my brother was eventually born many, many years later, I was really the athlete of the family. And again, it was all sports. Gymnastics was actually my passion and my love. And I did gymnastics through high school. But when my older sister joined high school and she joined the track team, my dad, who was a great athlete, he that reignited his love for running. He ran, I think 1 or 2 years in college, but not competitively, but he's just an athlete. And when my sister joined track in high school, that, reignited him and he began his marathon journey. It was on his bucket list of things to do. So he ran his first marathon at 40 years old and continued for the next 20 plus years. And that is also what kind of got me into running. Although as a child, gymnastics was my main sport. I did, the 5K 4th of July road race with dad when I was like 12 or 13 years old, because he started his really getting passionate about running. I also did track and field in high school and was pretty successful there, really successful for, our division and things like that. I did do sprints and hurdles and pole vault, which is understandable coming from that gymnastics background.
Yeah.
But with my family, with my dad doing the distance running, and both my sisters did cross country and they did like the 800, the 1,000. So I was kind of the oddball who was doing the sprints and power. And so I eventually did run track and field in college as well. I went to the University of Massachusetts Amherst. and continued with the sprints. So I did the 400 hurdles, I did pole vault, and various other, maybe a 4x4, 200 or something like that. But I think I had that love of distance running because I would go watch my dad do marathons and my sister's cross country races, but I wasn't doing it myself at that time. I love sprints, and I love the events too. I had a passion for that as well. It wasn't just like doing it because I was good at it. I truly love all track and field events. But, fast forward to post college, it was kind of like, okay, now I can do a half marathon,
Yes.
because I was always interested in the distance as well, but just never trained for it. I would say post college was quite injured. Oh my God, I don't even have a formal diagnosis, but like my hamstring, I just couldn't sprint anymore. I really couldn't. That first summer post college, I remember I was in pain walking. And so I took time off of running. And when I did get back into it, it was like, I was not going to do any fast twitch exercises. Like I was just going out for slow, easy jogs. I went to grad school, had a roommate who loved distance running. We just started doing slow, easy runs together. And then as I healed, it just progressed. And then my slow, easy runs became faster, but and so eventually, just at this point, I just call myself a runner. Whether it's 5Ks, 10Ks, I've done 2 full marathons. I do half marathon is my favorite because I get that distance bug, but I get to go faster and I still like speed. So that's a little bit about like my running, the last few years between COVID and then I'm pregnant now and have one baby. Like I haven't really been racing per se, right. But running is my preferred sport at this point in time still. So.
Well, half marathons were always my favorite too, because you're exactly right. You get to go do something that's a long enough distance where you feel like you've really accomplished something. And, you're hungry, you get to eat a good meal. And then also, you're not too tired to enjoy the rest of your day.
Totally. Yeah. And the training for it is so I'm going to say manageable. Once you train for a marathon, there's other things you have to sacrifice kind of. And with a half marathon, for me, at least, not so much. It's the training's very manageable. You still feel good. And I'm the type of person too. I don't love the 10K because I don't see much difference in my speed from the 10K to the half marathon. So I'm like, I might as well do the half marathon.
I'm pretty similar too. I can't imagine 2 polar opposite events between the pole vault and the half marathon. But
I know.
I love that because it means you have extra skills. A lot of us runners can just run in a straight line and that's it.
If we're lucky.
Yeah.
Right. If we're lucky.
Yeah. That gymnastics background, right? I did gymnastics. I think I started really doing it 4 days a week by age 7. Yeah. So from 7 to 18, and you just have such this versatility between, body awareness and different movements, different directions. And obviously that was 15 years ago. So I'm not trying to say that I still am in the shape of that, but I think that foundation of multi-directional and just different muscle groups, I really loved that about my upbringing with gymnastics. And I think, even though now maybe I am doing more just distance running, that background. And I do incorporate cross training that I'm still things that I learned, from gymnastics or from my sprinting days that I find really make me a strong athlete and feels really good.
Yeah, that's a lot of what many runners don't learn and get in trouble for, is because they don't know about the cross training, or they think it's maybe not as important. And those kinds of things make a huge difference in terms of how we can perform and also just not getting injured.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Lindsey, did your experience in sport and running influence your decision to become a dietitian at all, or were they completely separate things?
Oh, definitely. I think that's, every junior and senior in high school, it's what do I want to be when I grow up? And when you're really passionate about sports, it's that's where my interest is. What else do I want to do? Right.
Yeah.
I put so much time and effort and energy and just love into athletics. But as I was exploring the opportunities, career-wise, or what to study, sorry, but physical therapy didn't appeal to me.
Well, I'm glad it didn't, because you're so good at what you do.
We need good dietitians for sure.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, things to do with the body. I was like, physical therapy doesn't appeal to me. I was like, just studying exercise science at the time didn't appeal to me. Like I don't know. I was like, this is what I'm passionate about. And yet none of that really appealed to me. And by the way, I grew up in Massachusetts in a small town called Agawam. And right next to us is Springfield College, which is, known nationwide for like being athletic, like career fields, right? If you want to study sports, Springfield College is great for that. And so it was like, this is right here. And none of their degrees really appealed to me. It was so odd. It was my mom who pointed out to me, hey, Lindsey, you're really good at your diet. Why don't you do that? Why don't you study diets?
Interesting.
Yeah, I was interested in nutrition as it related to my performance. I had some superstitions when it comes to like gymnastics. I ate the same thing on meet day. You're flipping around like, I'm going to eat the same thing. I know it works for my stomach. I'm not going to have issues like going to the bathroom in a leotard. My goodness. Like, so
something I've never thought about, by the way, but yeah, that sounds difficult.
No, yeah. I wouldn't change anything that worked in that situation.
Yeah, it worked. And it was weird too what I ate. I'll share because I remember, because I had it every meet. I went to Subway and I got a tuna sandwich with pickles and a yellow vitamin water, the energy one. Yeah. Like that was my pre-meet gymnastics meal. And oh my gosh, I'm thinking about it right now. My mouth is watering. I'm like, that sounds really good.
When we're done recording, go get yourself a tuna fish sandwich.
You should probably go after this.
Go get it.
I might do that. Yeah. So between that, I had my kind of, whether it be superstitions or just awareness of what I ate mattered for my performance. As well as, in hindsight, I'm doing some things that I do not recommend. I was doing things that I don't recommend now. And I think were disordered eating behaviors, although I didn't recognize it at that time. But, I was calorie counting at a young age. I watched my mom do that for diet reasons, or what she thought was healthy at the time for her life. And I took an interest to that. Truly, this is coming from an innocent place, and it does for many people. My mom wanted to make healthier changes for her life. And what was in the media at that time was, do Weight Watchers, count your calories. And then I wanted to support my mom because I cared about health and athletics. And so I went to Weight Watchers meetings with my moms every once in a while on a Saturday morning just to support her. And then I learned about calories, and then I started being aware of it. And then I started a food journal, and all of this was, I've got little air quotes, innocent at the time.
Yeah.
And also, I do want to be clear too, at the time, it didn't hurt me necessarily. And so that's why when my mom was like, hey, like, you're good at your diet, why don't you study that? Why don't you teach other people to do that?
Yeah.
And so that's how I said, okay, I'll try that. I wasn't convinced I was going to love it, but by freshman year in college, I did like my coursework, and I liked that I could apply it to myself as an athlete. Also, I think it was within my freshman year of being at the University of Massachusetts, we had a guest speaker in one of our classes, Joan Bookbinder. She was at the time the sports dietitian for the Celtics. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do that. I want to be a sports dietitian for the Celtics or the Bruins or the Patriots, coming from Massachusetts. And of course, all my teachers were like, no, she's one in a million. She's a unicorn, because the role of sports dietitian really didn't exist even at that time. There were so few. The career field has made huge progress in the last 10 years, but all my advisors and teachers were like, you should probably study diabetes, and like that's where you're going to get a job, right? They really discoured me.
There's more money in diabetes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, and it's like, but I fortunately, kind of kept that vision of, I think I can be, a sports dietitian. But that's kind of how, so yes, to answer your question, Kacy, like me being an athlete is definitely, part of why I became a dietitian. I morphed along the way. And I like to share that story of my mom saying, hey, you're good at your diet. Why don't you do that? Because now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, actually, that wasn't good that a 15-year-old was counting her calories, right?
Right.
But that awareness of food started because of athletics and an interest in my body and what it was doing physically. And all of that was fair and innocent and good at the time. Yeah, I could keep going, but I'll pause.
Well, I mean, I'm having kind of like this like connection and flashbacks with my own experience, which I don't know. Most of our listeners know because I've talked about it on the podcast, but I've dealt with eating disorder and a lot of underfueling things since I was really young as well. And yeah, it's just not normal for, a 12 or 13-year-old to be counting calories and things like that. And it seems so innocent at the time, and it was very benign for a long time, but definitely crossed a line at some point. And I would like to bounce my experience off of yours at some point.
Yes.
But we don't want to spend all of our time on that. But I just wanted to say that I hear you, and I definitely connect with that.
Yeah. And I definitely now, when I talk to clients and their parents now, like that is the story so many people say of, well, I thought it was healthy, or like, the parent saying, well, I was proud of her because she was interested in taking care of herself, and it's like, gosh, I know, but I actually, at this point in time, I will say like calorie counting in adolescence is a red flag.
Yeah.
Macro counting, and you want to get your children in the kitchen and exposure to food and some interest in grocery shopping, because you also you don't want them heading off to college with no nutrition knowledge. But if it's like, wait, a 15-year-old is cooking her own dinners. No.
Yep,
what are we doing we got to eat together as a family instead. And maybe you can help with dinner preparation or do it one day a week, but not every night. I think those are some red flags for parents to actually look out for.
Well, and what are some other red flags, Lindsey? We would love to have that for anybody who's listening.
Yeah. So I think from like a behavioral standpoint or more physical. Yeah. I think from a behavioral.
Let's go through both actually, Lindsey, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah. So behavioral standpoint, I would say eating in isolation is certainly one. So whether that be what I was just saying of like, hey, I'm going to make my own dinner instead of eating with the family, or taking food up to their room, that could be a red flag. Could be not a problem, but could be a red flag. Making a sudden change in their diet of, oh, mom, dad, I'm not eating that anymore, or certainly using the words healthy, unhealthy, or good, bad, kind of categorizing foods. That could be some red flags of their thought process changing. Again, I think just the amount of time spent on food is like a red flag. As a kid, they should be spending time with friends and homework and other activities. So if all of their hobbies and interests are surrounding food, red flag. Somebody who personally, I obviously had an interest in food. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but how much time exactly is being spent on that? There's so many behaviors that I can't always necessarily say like that's like it's all in context, right? But, if you ever see like hoarding of food or wrappers, or, oh, here's a huge behavior one, over reading labels excessively or too much, and being nitpicky about certain ingredients. Those are some more like behavioral things I think would be red flags.
Mm-hmm. And then what about some of the physical?
So one of the issues with physical red flags is sometimes it takes time for it to show up, right? And that's why I think looking at those behaviors is important too, because sometimes like a lot of people, and this is a misconception, but a lot of people think eating disorder means, weight loss or severe weight loss or being, wicked thin or something like that. And that's not always the case, especially not in athletics. Mm-hmm. And I do want to do a reminder that an eating disorder isn't just eating a small amount or a little amount of food. We also have, binge eating disorder. We also just have the mental disordered relationship with food. We also have the fact that sometimes weight does weird things. You can be restricting calories and yet weight not drop, weight stay the same, or weight increase. Really interesting. So, physically, some people, I do want to point out that, hey, any sudden or drastic weight changes could be down. It could be up even. That's just something to say, why is this happening? especially I will say in a younger person who should still be developing and growing, if their weight drops, that's concerning, right? Like from 13 to 15, there probably should be a little bit of weight gain.
Yeah.
And so if suddenly there's weight loss, that's concerning. But it's not all about weight is the point I'm trying to make. That is one red flag, but it's not all about weight. If there's underfueling, regardless of weight, you're going to, from a performance perspective, see, reduced energy, reduced recovery. So performance kind of worsening or slowing down. Physical manifestations could be things like kind of hair getting brittle or falling out, bruising easily. That's one. Getting cold if somebody's complaining about being cold all the time, or even getting that diagnosis. I always say it wrong. Raynaud's.
Yeah.
Raynaud's. I can't tell you how many clients come to me saying that they've been diagnosed with that. And I'm like, let's work on your nutrition first. I'm not denying it's a real diagnosis, but they're actually just underfueled and they're getting diagnosed with Raynaud's instead. Yeah.
I've never heard that actually. We do get people that say they have Raynaud's periodically, but it's not that often. And it typically is Raynaud's. So I never knew that could be a sign. Cold makes sense, but that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, honestly, I haven't looked at the research to see if there's a correlation. I think it's a misdiagnosis. I think they're just cold often because of the underfueling. And then they get diagnosed with that when maybe it wasn't really fully that. So being cold all the time, the easy bruising, like I mentioned, we can look at lab work as well and see not only things like, low iron or low vitamin D, but we see disrupted liver enzymes. And that's why are your liver enzymes off? That shouldn't be happening unless we have liver disease, which, so liver enzymes can be off, and even blood triglyceride and cholesterol levels. Those can actually be falsely elevated sometimes, which is very confusing because then they see, oh my gosh, I have high cholesterol. I need to eat less fat. No. It's like the exact opposite. We need to fuel better and nourish. And maybe it could be eat more fats. It could be a variety of things, but we need to nourish better. And those cholesterol and triglyceride levels will even out. So those are some physical things: altered liver enzymes, altered triglycerides. There's probably more.
That's all right. I think that's a good list, and it gives people information what to look for. And we've started to talk about a few things. You've said some words that I think people may not know what they are.
Okay.
So if we could kind of talk about, just for our audience, what underfueling means, what disordered eating means, and then we also want to talk about RED-S. So if you could get into define those a little bit, and just so our audience has an understanding.
Okay. So underfueling is a term that I use a lot, and I don't know that there's an official definition to it.
Yeah.
But because here's the thing, everybody has their own unique needs of how much fuel is right for your body. And I'll just start by saying it does not necessarily mean a 2,000 calorie standard diet is correct. Okay. When we say underfuel, it's all basically, are you consuming less than what your body requires to function optimally? We see this happen a lot in athletes, accidentally or intentionally, but accidentally because your body requires a lot in sport. You're expending a lot, you're burning a lot of calories. And so your calories need to be higher. Your calorie intake needs to be higher. And yet a lot of people aren't eating what their body requires to be, one, a healthy human first and foremost, and then two, to support all the energy needed to support their training and their recovery and their muscle growth. And one of the reasons this happens very easily in athletes can very easily underfuel. One of the reasons is our appetite kind of gets screwed up. Sometimes after a hard workout, you don't have a good appetite. You're feeling kind of sick and queasy. The last thing I want to think about right now is food. There's many athletes who have suppressed appetite hormones, suppressed appetite post workouts. So you're not inclined to eat. And then we can think about to the time, where maybe on a day you're not working out, you'd have a 3 p.m. snack, but I've got a workout from 2 to 4. So you just the timing of things and scheduling of things, there's maybe less time to eat. And so athletes can very easily underfuel because of the appetite suppression, because of less time to eat. there's a few other reasons, but I'll talk about that when I define disordered eating. But so I think it's very easy for athletes to just eat less than their body requires, which isn't good. That's where we're not optimizing our performance, and we run the risk of some of those physical manifestations that I was just mentioning. But one thing I do want to state clearly is underfueling, is different than having an eating disorder per se, although they can overlap. But this is where I think from a sports perspective too, you want to just say like fuel enough and optimally, because that can maximize your performance. When you're under fueling, you're under recovering, then you're under training, then you're underperforming.
Yeah.
So you're really limiting your potential there. Now, when I say disordered eating, that again doesn't actually have a great definition either. Because how do we define what is like the right way to eat? You can't. It's individualized to everybody. We do know, what eating disorders are. There's anorexia, there's bulimia, there's binge eating disorder, there's orthorexia, and then we have a category of eating disorders not otherwise specified, because it's kind of encapsulating the what if it's kind of a mixture of all these things, or a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Eating disorders are considered a mental disease, a mental diagnosis, because it is a disordered thinking of food that affects your behaviors. And then it's the fact that this affects our behaviors around food that affects our physical body. But it starts in the mind, really. And then our thoughts affect our behaviors, which has the physical manifestations that are very real and very serious. And so when I say disordered eating, it can really be anywhere on the spectrum of maybe I'm doing some behaviors. Maybe I'm doing that daily calorie counting that's taking up so much of my brain space and stressing me out and dictating what I think I'm allowed to eat or not allowed to eat. And then it makes me feel stressed out when I'm out at a restaurant. It's kind of like whether or not we have this official eating disorder diagnosis or even have the physical manifestations, like this is causing a lot of mental stress or anxiety or, rules around food that might be limiting somebody's life.
Well, and Lindsey, I found it really interesting on your website. You say that about 45% of female athletes actually engage in some sort of disordered eating.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
It is. And I mean, I think that the huge component of it is that maybe we just don't understand that we're even doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, if I go back to like what is considered right, there is a lot of, where people are like, oh, I didn't know that was not good. And it's all about how does this affect your life, right? Yeah. Now, if up to 45% of female athletes are engaging in some sort of behaviors that are somewhat disordered, so how does that affect them? Well, we do know that nearly 25% of NCAA collegiate athletes have altered menstrual cycle function, right? Disrupted menstrual cycles. We know that nearly 25% of them are at high risk of anorexia as well. So it's like, well, this is affecting them. 10% have issues with bone mineral density and therefore injury. So it's like if up to 45 are participating in these behaviors, it's affecting, sometimes 25 to 30% is actually affecting their health or performance or mental health in some way. So it's kind of like that thing about like these disordered behaviors. It's kind of like, okay, we need to take it all into context, but also it's kind of like, okay, well, this could be a red flag.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that calorie counting is bad for everybody on the planet, but research is kind of showing for most people, it leads us down this path of obsessiveness around food.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you talk about it as a spectrum, because this is how I've always thought about it too, because it's like a lot of these diagnoses where there's no, line that you cross, right?
Yeah.
That can't be quantified per se. And, there's just a spectrum of behaviors around food. And, eventually the needle gets pushed to being unhealthy and being disordered and being a problem. And, what's interesting is I'm actually thinking through what we think about with physical therapy, right? Like, how is this injury affecting your life? And we are going to address that. Because, we can't strive for perfection all the time. So it's like, okay, how can we best, live with what we have and live a fulfilled life given these cards that we're dealt, right? And I think the other thing that the big tie with disordered eating is it's very, in my experience, it's very closely in the family of like addiction and like mental health disorder, where, sometimes it's not about food at all.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's so hard for a lot of people to understand because of that.
Oh, absolutely. Let me just start with some basic things here to say, like, food is a part of everybody's life in some way, shape, or form. Our family influences us a lot with our food, right? From childhood, whether it's what we grew up eating or words that were said around food. And then our peers, our social environment influences us a lot. Athletics influence us with what we think is right or wrong to eat, or maybe our team or club or running group. We have so many people and things that have influenced eating choices. So it gets really, really like complicated really fast, I think. And so again, how is this affecting your life? We really have to think about that deeply. And what is the role of food in your life? Sometimes, like you were mentioning, Kacy, it's not always about food. It's about, the social thing. It's about maybe some trauma that happened. It's about our pursuit of athletics. It's about our personality trait of being a perfectionist, or, even being science-minded. I have to admit to that myself. I have the science mind. I'm a numbers person. So like that drew me to nutrition and I know I've had so many clients like this too, that they like math, they like science, and they want to make nutrition and food like fit that mold. Yeah. X amount of calories and Y amount of macros and, X amount of exercise should equal exactly what I'm supposed to eat in a day. And we want it to be this perfect equation. And I definitely got sucked into that too, of just that science mindset of, trying to figure this out. And yet it doesn't. And so that led myself and many clients actually down a disordered path too, because then sometimes things don't make sense. It's not this perfect equation. It's really not, right?
Well, that's the way it's taught a lot, right?
Yeah.
Calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
Like a pound of fat is what burned 3,500 more calories than what you consume. They did, but I think we're learning more and more that that's just not the case. And it's a lot more complicated than that.
It is. Oh my gosh. So yeah, nutrition can get very, very complicated. And yet my approach as a dietitian is to make it as simple as possible, because it can get so complicated so fast. And then it's like, wait a second, this should be simple. Like, one of my clients this morning was trying to figure out like what amount of protein or what protein food to pair with their graham cracker. And I was like, you know what? Just like peanut butter on graham cracker sounds good. Like make it simple. What sounds good? All right, perfect. Like, I know it's not a full 10 grams, but that's okay. Like this, like we got to make it simple somehow. And teaching that to clients, especially with that science mindset is hard. But it can be done to simplify it.
Let's talk a little bit about Rise Up Nutrition then.
Okay.
So you were talking about, just speaking to one of your clients. So you founded Rise Up Nutrition in like 2018, and tell us a little bit about why you founded it and then how it's evolved over the last several years.
All right. So I think I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset, or just like the drive to do my own thing. That's always been in me. So even when I worked full time for other organizations, I always had my little Wix website up. I was always taken, like if somebody wanted to work with me on the side, I was always kind of like coming up with ideas in my head. So I always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial mindset first and foremost. But if I'm being completely honest, why not? The real reason that I started Rise Up Nutrition is because I had a complete life change. So I had worked at a couple different universities as a full-time sports dietitian for a number of years. And then I worked as a lead tactical sports dietitian for Air Force Special Operations for a few years. Cool. And a couple of events happened where I left that job. It became a challenging and difficult work environment. So I decided to leave that job. And I also, there's no shame in this, I met my now husband through that job.
Nice.
And so he's military and he got reassigned And so I left the job and moved across the country for the first time following a man. I had never done that before. That was quite scary. As
hopefully you only do it once, right, Lindsey?
Yes, absolutely. But I also want to share, like, it really was like, that was a huge deal for me because I just was this like, like female empowerment, like, striving for your career and like, don't follow a man type. And then like, boom, I just did it. It was this complete like leap of faith. And it's obviously all worked out. He's my husband. But yeah, suddenly I moved across country and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a job. What am I going to do now? Right. So I had this huge life change. And the reason I want to share that though, is because I was at a vulnerable place in my life. And my husband truly was the one who envisioned this for me. I knew I always wanted to do my own thing, but I was in this mindset. I was in a vulnerable place and like, but I need a paycheck, but I need insurance because we weren't married yet at that time. Like and he was like, no, you're better. Like, I'm no joke. I was at the point where I was applying to jobs at Planet Fitness to be a personal trainer just because I needed an income. Okay.
Yeah.
It was this is after years of being a successful sports dietitian, but it was like, I was just needed a job. And he was the one that truly was like, you shouldn't work for anybody else. You've got to work for yourself. Like, you're too good for all these other job applications you're doing. And so he really helped me to envision this and to bring it to life. What it started with is, okay, I'm going to do my own business and I'm going to do my own nutrition consulting. But that first year was really rough. And like I said, vulnerable like time in my life. I had to do a lot of soul searching on, I don't just want to like start a business to start a business. Like, who do I want to help and why? And so throughout all the years of being a sports dietitian, I was just, because to do your own business, you have to be really passionate about it. Like, if I was thinking about like, this is no offense to the football players, but it's just not my favorite sport. And so it was like, I don't just want to promote working with athletes and then have these like football player clients. It just didn't excite me.
Yeah.
Right.
I get it.
So the clients that excited me when I thought back to my entire career, it was always the female athletes that wanted to feel better for performance, but honestly were really stuck, whether it be in their mindset or their behaviors, that they had some sort of disordered relationship with food. I saw these clients throughout my years of where I worked at Florida State. I worked at the University of Georgia, and I did start working when I moved to Texas part-time at the University of Texas, San Antonio, as their consulting sports dietitian as well. And those are just my favorite clients because it's like, there's a problem and we can truly fix it. And we can see this transformation, not just in their performance, which is amazing to see them, PR or whatever it might be, but in their life. Oh my gosh, they're happier. Oh my gosh, they're more social now. So those were always my favorite clients. And, like I mentioned, even when I worked full time, I always had some little side gigs. Those were always the clients that found me somehow. There was this huge need for it, And I also loved working with a high school and college athlete, because I think it's kind of like you could transform their life and know that, they had their whole life ahead of you. Now, I love working with women my age or older than me because it's never too late. But there is something really special about, a 14, 15, 16-year-old that, like, they don't have to suffer for the next 10 or 20 years. We caught this early and we changed this early on. So anyways, that first year of business, it was a lot of soul searching. Like, those are my favorite clients. And frankly, just a reflection of my own life. I think I had been through my own journey with food and athletics and fueling and recognizing over the years. So I am not somebody who ever had a formally diagnosed eating disorder or ever went to go seek treatment. But, did I have disordered eating behaviors that throughout my studies and career as a dietitian, I had to work that out. And so I had my own journey of discovering how to fuel optimally, how to let go of some of these weird behaviors, how to let go of calorie counting, how to do more like intuitive eating, but also like nail sports nutrition, right? Like, that was my own journey. And so that first year of establishing Rise of Nutrition was just a soul searching of what lights me up and what makes me want to work every day. Like, who are the clients I want to help? And then also like, what's my journey? And so that's how I started Rise Up Nutrition. I mean, certainly my first few years was a little bit of working with whoever wanted to work with me because I needed an income. But then I got to the point where I was like, I really invested in it fully. I niched down. I got business coaching, started, marketing, and it just kind of flourished from there. And, in a good and bad way, I'm happy the business has flourished. It's also just crazy that there's such a need for this.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of sad. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know you are an incredibly busy woman between your podcast, your Female Athlete Nutrition podcast, seeing clients. I mean, you do online courses. I'm always emailing you about something, asking for something from you. I'm sure other people are. And then also, as a mom. So I mean, you're definitely an entrepreneur and have that kind of spirit. But you're very busy and so passionate about what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool to see business grow and what can be done. And so, within Rise Up Nutrition, I just want to, I don't know, I'm in a loving mood today. So I'm giving my husband the credit here. He helped me come up with that name because it's not that your name really matters. It's about the results and what you do. But I do want to share, that there is some meaning behind it of allowing food to be something that helps you rise up to the next level or helps you elevate your life. And so we came up with Rise Up Nutrition, and we're like, oh my gosh, that spells RUN, that spells run. Like, how amazing is that? Rise Up Nutrition. So, and then as I started working with clients, and I niched down to say, okay, I help female athletes overcome disordered eating to perform at their highest level. As I did that, I started kind of developing my process, I think, really. So I have now a program. Everything that I do is individualized, but it is a 12-week program. And it's this process that I've been running for 3-4 years now that, when a client comes to me, we have our method that really works and really gets amazing results. Everybody's unique, everybody's individualized. And that's why there's one-on-one consulting involved in it. But this process and this holistic approach, it's kind of like a 3-tier thing. We focus on our female athletes becoming fierce, fit, and fueled. And what I mean by that is fierce in their mindset, overcoming limiting beliefs, negative self-talk or doubt, changing that relationship with food and body, and showing up to a meal with confidence that this is good for me, and showing up on the starting line with confidence that they're ready to go. And when I say fit, that's the whole point of myself and my team. I have another dietitian on my team, Jenna, where we are truly looking at, are you getting the nutrients you need, nutritionally? Are you getting enough iron? Are you getting enough magnesium and protein to really be healthy from the inside out? And that's what I mean by the word fit. I know maybe that's a controversial word to some people, but fit, are you healthy from the inside out? Because you have to be a healthy human first before you can be a high performing athlete. So whether that be, we've got bone issues or hormonal imbalances, things like that, we're going to make sure that we're working on those things nutritionally first. And then once you're fierce and you're fit, are you fueled? Are you fueled for sport athletically? This is kind of the sexy sports nutrition stuff. How do I have pre-workout, post-workout? How do I recover? What if I'm an injured athlete right now? What if I've got a race coming up or, a tournament weekend? So we had a client this past weekend who just joined us 2 weeks ago. So we've got a ways as far as everything we're working on, relationship with food and all that. But she had a half marathon this weekend. We walked her through a fueling hydration plan and she PR'd. So that's awesome, right? So that sports nutrition piece. So those are my, philosophy and how I work with clients, that kind of holistic approach of being fierce, fit, and fueled. And we do that through my program called the Female Athlete System of Transformation. All about the acronyms here. It spells out FAST because we want you to be fast.
You're the all-time marketer, Lindsey. You win the award. I'm always impressed. Awesome. It's so awesome.
It's just, I think it's so fun too, because it's I didn't start the business that way, but it's as you start working with clients, it's just oh my gosh, it just makes so much sense, right? And it's fast too. Another reason I like to call it the fast track is because it's 12 weeks of working together. And some people just struggle with nutrition for years and years and years. We want to make sure that as fast as possible, you can overcome your major obstacles as fast as possible. So we invest 12 weeks, which sounds like a big commitment, but it goes by fast to really work on all of these things. So that's, there's other things like you mentioned. I do have an online course for self-study and, a few other things too, because I don't want somebody who's saying, hey, I really resonate with what Lindsey's saying, but like, I don't think I have disordered eating. Hey, reach out anyways, because we do have other things. Maybe it's the course and like, a one-time deep dive session to help you figure out a fueling plan and you're good to go. So we've got a few other options. I want anybody who's just a female athlete and kind of vibes with our philosophy and principles to reach out and see what we can do for you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we are getting close to our mark here because I know.
Sorry, I talk a lot.
No, I love it. This is really great. I really do love it. But what I would also like to know is if there's someone listening to this and they're struggling with some of the things that we've talked about, or maybe this is the first time they've even heard the idea of disordered eating or any of this, what would you say directly to them or what advice would you give them?
I talk a lot, but I'm silent now.
It's a hard question.
Yeah. Well, and to summarize everything, I think my advice is you deserve to fuel your body freely, fiercely. And what I mean by that is to enjoy food and also have it be something that makes you feel good, that nourishes your body. And if you're an athlete, then something that you feel confident helps you achieve your athletic goals and dreams and aspirations as well. Food is a part of our life every day, and it's part of everybody's life. So you deserve to have the opportunity to make that something really, really great and have it be something that is easy. Nutrition should be easy. If it's something you have to do every single day, we got to make it easy. It should be enjoyable, and it should be something that truly elevates your life and makes you physically, mentally feel good. And so for any reason that's not the case right now, for any reason at all, then that's worth exploring. That would be my advice is, whether it's through me or other avenues, just that's worth exploring to say, maybe I can do nutrition a little bit better, or maybe I can think about nutrition a little bit differently so that this actually is something that helps me in my life and not something that's causing disruption, stress, anxiety, physical manifestations, whatever it might be. So that's my advice.
I love it.
Thank you so much for the work that you do, Lindsey, because it's so important. I feel like the tides are kind of changing a little bit in terms of how female athletes, how endurance athletes think about food, which I think is really the entry point. That's where we prevent things like underfueling and red S and altered menstrual cycles, all of these problems that we know that endurance athletes face. And I think this piece of how do we think about food, and to have someone as smart and strong as you to tell people you need to eat more.
Yeah.
You need to fuel yourself. We're not talking about low calorie, low fat, low carb, which is all, fads in the past. It's like, no, you need to eat more if you want to reach your potential. And to have people with that strong voice is so important. So I could keep commending you forever and ever. So I'll stop. But thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you for being a supporter of it and giving me the opportunity to kind of share a little bit more too.
Yeah, this has been great. And Lindsey, where can people find you?
My website is riseupnutritionrun.com. And my podcast is the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast. We release one episode a week. And on Instagram, I'm at female.athlete.nutrition.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lindsey.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you so much for listening today. We are so happy that you're here. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with a friend. Even better, share it on social media because sharing is caring. And the more people we can reach, the better.
Another way you can help us out is by leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Podcast. So give us those 5 stars and tell us how awesome we are. Really, we love to hear how awesome we are. To support our work financially, you can also join our Patreon squad at patreon.com/morethanmiles, where for a few dollars a month, you can help us keep the show going and growing.
This season is sponsored by Fast Bananas. Why buy multiple subscriptions made for everyone when you can have one specifically crafted for runners? Fast Bananas has online yoga classes, strength training programs, meditations, recipes, communities to ask questions, and so much more. Check out Fast Bananas at fastbananas.com or follow them on Instagram at fastbananasrun.
Don't forget that training is so much more than miles.